Hello students, we are going to talk about chapter 5, energy. So, in this chapter of energy, we are going to discuss some of the learning objectives. So we will be defining what energy is, how energy is going to flow through the ecosystem and provide sustenance of all living organisms on Earth, how photosynthesis, which is the key process that green plants use to absorb the sunlight energy and transfer it into chemical energy to manufacture food, and how then, during the process of cellular respiration, food molecules are then being converted into the energy molecule called ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is the universal energy molecule of the cell. So, here what we see, just to reiterate information that we've already studied on energy, is energy. Energy is the ability to perform work. And therefore, when you look at energy, energy exists in different forms. Potential energy, kinetic energy, solar sunlight energy, chemical energy, mechanical energy, etc. Here we are looking at this slide that says, cars that run on French fry oil, organisms and machines need energy to work. So these activities that living organisms are fueled by would be either chemical energy, potential mechanical, or kinetic energy. In this case, we see they're showing an aircraft and how this aircraft is being powered by biofuel. So we need to define or understand the concept of biofuel as well as fossil fuels. Now, how do these organisms use or obtain energy? Energy, as I mentioned, is the ability to do work. And so this energy, which exists as potential energy, or kinetic, or chemical, or solar energy, or mechanical, is being used to power either aircrafts or run our motor vehicles. In plants, we know typically sunlight energy is used to convert sunlight energy, which is absorbed by the plants, is converted into chemical energy. And chemical energy is the energy that is used to break the chemical bonds. So what then is this biofuels? Biofuels are fuels that are produced either by plants or animals, and products that are obtained from plant and animals will be the biofuels. And we've seen most of the vehicles are run on fossil fuels. One example of a fossil fuel is gasoline that runs the cars. Today we have hybrid cars which will run both on fossil fuels gas or gasoline as well as on electrical power. Now these fossil fuels will also include oil, natural gas, and coal. How are these fossil fuels obtained? And what are they? They are the fuels that are obtained from the dead remains of both plants and animals that existed over millions of years ago. And now, due to environmental changes that have occurred on account of heat, pressure, as well as bacterial decomposition, these fossil fuels have changed. So it turns out that both the biofuels as well as fossil fuels And the food fuels are the ones that are supplying energy to all living organisms. And they happen to be very chemically similar. So the sun is the source of energy that is stored in these chemical bonds between the atoms in all these fuels. So let us look at some energy conversions and the forms in which the energy exists. And all the life, we can see plants, we can see animals there. So all this life depends on the sunlight energy or the solar energy captured from the sun, which is then converted into a form that living organisms are able to use. There are two main processes of these energy conversions that are taking place and by which living organisms are able to live. And one is photosynthesis, the other is cellular respiration. So what then is photosynthesis? Photo comes from the word light, synthesis is manufacture. So it's the process where only green plants, they can manufacture their food with the help of sunlight energy, which is then converted into chemical energy that is present in the chemical bonds of plants. So that energy breaks, bonds are broken down, chemical energy is produced with the help of sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide gas, releasing oxygen. So oxygen is released during photosynthesis. So we see here now that oxygen that is being released during photosynthesis is used up by other plants, which are non-green plants, and animals to undergo this cellular respiration. So what is cellular respiration? Cellular respiration is the process where most living organisms are going to absorb oxygen that is being released by these plants and use it to break down the food during chemical digestion, releasing carbon dioxide gas. So that CO2 gas, which is carbon dioxide gas that we plants, some plants and animals are going to release, is then used by the green plants to carry out photosynthesis. So in other words, cellular respiration is the opposite process of photosynthesis. However, photosynthesis is only manufacturing of food, which occurs in the daytime because plants require sunlight energy to carry out photosynthesis. Plants also respire, they also breathe. And so cellular respiration is also carried out by plants. And we can only measure this process in plants during nighttime on account of photosynthesis, which occurs during the day. So during cellular respiration, also the plants are going to obtain or absorb the oxygen gas, and they are going to now release carbon dioxide gas. So these are the usable forms that both plants and animals are required to carry out these processes. So we talked about the energy. Please read this take-home message. Energy from sunlight stored in the chemical bonds of molecules, and when these bonds are broken down, energy will be released, regardless of whether the bond is present in the food or in fossil fuels or in biofuels. And so here we're looking at the different forms, as I mentioned earlier, of in which energy exists. They exist as potential energy, kinetic. Main forms. Potential energy is the energy that is present, that is stored energy. kinetic energy is energy in motion. And so here we can see kinetic energy is the energy that is present when this living organism, when he is trying to ride his bike, that potential energy, which was stored energy, is now being converted into kinetic energy. Here, potential energy, energy stored in any object, such as the water trap behind the dam or a skier that is poised on top of the hill. So these are the different examples of both potential and kinetic energy. Now we see stored energy would be energy in the strawberry. That's potential energy that is stored inside these chemical bonds. Once the chemical bond is broken down, then that is kinetic energy. So chemical energy is a form of potential energy stored in chemical bonds. We see here glucose. As in photosynthesis equation 2, glucose was the energy provider molecule for photosynthesis to take place. And where is this glucose present? Glucose is C6H12O6, which we learned in macromolecules. It's a type of carbohydrate, namely monosaccharide. And so we see sucrose was present, which was also a monosaccharide present in fruits. So they are showing you how glucose can be broken down, which is present in the fruits. So energy is the ability to do work. The take-home message comes in two forms, kinetic and potential energy. Now we look at the different ways in which energy is transformed. We have two laws of transformation of energy. One is the law, which is under the title of thermodynamics. So two laws of thermodynamics, first law of thermodynamics and second law. What is thermal? Thermal comes from the word heat, so it is the study of how energy is being transferred or transformed from one form to another, or one type to another. The first law of thermodynamics states that energy can neither be created or destroyed, but it can be converted from one form to another. And that's the first law of thermodynamics. So, because plants capture less than 1% of the sun's energy, it might seem that they are particularly inefficient. But we humans are also rather inefficient at extracting all the chemical energy of plants that we eat. So when a human converts this chemical energy in a plate of spaghetti into the kinetic energy of running a marathon, or when a car is transforming chemical energy from gasoline to the kinetic energy, when they are moving forward, some of that energy is converted to heat, which is the least usable form of the kinetic energy in cars. So most of that energy that is present in gasoline will be lost as heat. So heat is nothing else but it is the unused energy, energy that is not being used to perform any work or activity is lost to the environment as heat. Let's look at the second law of thermodynamics. The second law of thermodynamics states that for every conversion of energy that is not perfectly efficient, some energy will be lost or converted to heat. So energies need the first two laws of thermodynamics that we just stated is the take-home message. Let's look at ATP. This is a very important term that we need in cells too, that we learn that ATP, which stands for adenosine triphosphate, is the energy molecule of any cell. And we refer to them as being rechargeable batteries in all living cells. So we look at ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Adenosine triphosphate comes from the word adenine. When it is attached to ribose sugar, forms adenosine. Tri comes from the word three phosphate groups, so triphosphate. Now, every time ATP molecule is used, it gets simplified or broken down into ADP and AMP. So I'm going to open another slide here. I will just leave this. So when one bond gets broken down, you have two bonds left, and this phosphate is organic phosphate, gets converted into inorganic. PI stands for inorganic phosphate. So when you have ATP, three phosphate molecules, one phosphate is broken down, you're left with two phosphate molecules. These two phosphates now, the molecule would be called adenosine diphosphate. Again, one phosphate bond is broken down that is used to perform some work. You are left with one phosphate bond. That phosphate bond that gets broken down once again is converted into inorganic phosphate. So you're left with one phosphate. So now this molecule is called AMP, which is adenosine monophosphate. So from triphosphate, one bond gets broken, you're left with two, adenosine diphosphate. Again, one phosphate bond gets broken down, you're left with one phosphate, so it's called adenosine monophosphate. So all the time, when energy is being used due to the breaking of the chemical bond, adenosine triphosphate is broken down to adenosine diphosphate and adenosine monophosphate. So we're seeing here how ATP gets broken down to ADP and AMP. And every time the bond is broken down, as I just stated, energy will be released. So that energy that is released from ATP or ADP or AMP molecule is used to drive all the chemical reactions that the cell requires to function efficiently. For example, when we want to build the muscle tissues, when you want to repair a wound, when the roots are growing, these all require energy that is obtained from ATP molecule. So where does plant matter come from? Comes from photosynthesis, which is photosynthesis is using the sunlight energy, converted into chemical energy to make food. And the organic molecules that are used during this process, mainly glucose is used, which will be broken down, carbon dioxide gas is absorbed, and oxygen is a byproduct. So you could be asked the question, what gas is emitted or what gas is produced during photosynthesis? And the gas or the byproduct of photosynthesis is oxygen. What gas is absorbed is carbon dioxide gas. During photosynthesis, the opposite will be for cellular respiration, where oxygen is absorbed and carbon dioxide gas is released during cellular process respiration. So photosynthesis and cellular respiration are both opposite processes. So let's look at photosynthesis. Again, we see how the energy was captured from the sun, and it was stored in the leaves. Now, why are the leaves green in color? Because they contain this green pigment called chlorophyll. We learned this in the lab when we looked at the allodia leaf, the allodia leaves, the allodia cells. You have seen how these green structures, the organelle that contains the green pigment is chloroplast. And so you see here how the energy is captured and stored in these leaves, and then it is converted into chemical energy during photosynthesis. I just explained to you that during photosynthesis, oxygen is a byproduct and carbon dioxide gas is being absorbed. During cellular respiration, carbon dioxide gas is absorbed and oxygen will be released as a byproduct. So this is explained in this figure. Let's go to the next. Again, this is showing you a structure of the leaves where these cells are packed within the chloroplast. So the chloroplast I just explained here was present in the green leaves of plants, and this chloroplast contains the green pigment called chlorophyll. So in plants, photosynthesis occurs in the chloroplast, which are the organelles that contain the green pigment. As this slide is indicating, it's packed in cells near the plant surfaces, especially in the leaves. During cellular respiration, energy is released from the chemical bonds of food molecules, and it is stored in the bonds of ATP molecules, which is the usable form of energy from cells. So here we have beer, wine, and spirits. They are all byproducts of cellular metabolism in the absence of oxygen, because we've seen. Now, when you talk of cellular respiration, there are of two types, aerobic respiration and anaerobic. Aerobic comes, we sometimes conduct aerobic exercises where we are using a lot of energy because we're taking in oxygen, releasing all carbon dioxide gas, which is the byproduct. So in aerobic respiration, you're using oxygen. So most animals and plants and like us will undergo aerobic respiration when we take in oxygen and we're releasing CO2 gas, which is our byproduct. Now, during strenuous exertion, our muscles can require more oxygen than is available to us. So, and therefore, when you use a lot of energy and you're running, athletes, they burn a lot of energy when they run, and therefore they start panting. So they require more oxygen to breathe. And the last is fermentation is the process where cells require energy to breathe in the absence of oxygen. So anaerobic respiration is the process where organisms require carbon dioxide gas to survive. And therefore, in the absence of oxygen means CO2 gas needs to be present. And these cells are obtaining the energy in the absence of oxygen. Fermentation, when we think of fermentation, brewing of beer, of coffee, when you're making wine, you see all the bubbles that are present when you take wine and when you take water, you add yeast. Yeast, as I explained to you when we talked of prokaryotes and eukaryotes for fungi kingdom, yeast was the only unicellular fungus. All fungi are multicellular. Why? Because it helps in the breakdown of large complex molecules into smaller ones, releasing what it's going to release now, oxygen gas. So we see Because yeast prefers the more efficient process of aerobic respiration, they produce alcohol only in the absence of oxygen. Fermentation of beer, producing wine, beer, spirits, are built to keep the oxygen out so that the yeast cells are forced to use carbon dioxide gas for fermentation. And so we see it's a process by which cells obtain energy in the absence. It occurs when following glycolysis. Glycolysis, the process of breakdown of glucose. Ethanol is always the alcohol produced by fermentation. Fermentation tanks used in producing wine, beer, and other spirits are built to keep oxygen out so that yeast cells are forced to use the backup pathway of fermentation. So with this, we finish the topic of energy. And so just to reiterate, you need to know what is energy, the different forms in which energy exists, the two laws of thermodynamics, first law, second law, the two types of cellular respiration, photosynthesis, cellular respiration. Cellular respiration is of two types, aerobic respiration, anaerobic in the examples. Thank you, students. Hope you enjoyed the presentation and the recording.